You're listening to the Misfit Therapist podcast with Dr. A, where it's all about talking through some messy psych shit so we can all get better soon. This show is not intended to diagnose or treat mental health disorders, nor is it a substitution for mental health services. Please seek counseling, medication, or crisis intervention services if needed.
Well, hello, Misfits. This is episode 5. We're calling today's episode "That Was Abuse?" I'm Dr. A. Thanks for coming back. A warning about today's episode. It may trigger something in you as we're talking about emotional abuse, specifically withholding love. You may need to debrief or process this episode with a friend, perhaps journal, or just cry it out. Know that if you're in this space, I am sending you so much light and love. Energy is a powerful thing. If something triggers you, I'm so sorry, and I'm glad. I'm sorry that someone has hurt you, and I'm glad that your body is giving you the warning signals that you may need some deeper healing, and that you may need to leave the place or person causing you harm. I've received lots of requests for today's episode. I'm going to guess that it's because 2020 has forced people to be in closer quarters, unfortunately amplifying the bad behavior that is living in some homes. Hell, COVID-19 has amplified all sorts of things. I feel like the world needs a limpia, like an emotional cleansing with some white sage and palo santo or something. During my episodes, there is usually pen and paper time, but today it's about deeply absorbing what is being said, so let's just get right into it. One of the most emotionally damaging, manipulative, and toxic behaviors I've ever witnessed is that of withholding love, also known as emotional withholding. I'm sad to report that this maladaptive behavior is more common than people think. Withholding love is when a person intentionally uses their affection, their presence, and their praise against you. I want to repeat that. Withholding love is when a person intentionally uses their affection, their presence, and their praise against you. I want to keep something very clear right now. These actions are purposeful, they are deliberate, and it is a possibility that they are coming from someone who possesses narcissistic traits or someone with traits indicative of a personality disorder. Now, this isn't always the case. We can't go around pathologizing everyone. Some people are just assholes. They have unfortunately learned this behavior from caregivers or the space they grew up in. These kinds of people who withhold love are usually easily annoyed, irritable, display low frustration tolerance, which then leads to anger arousal and then full blown anger management issues. Their behaviors are usually exacerbated by stress. Let me pause here for a second. I'm not going to go into full criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. It's an actual diagnosis. There are a lot of people that engage in emotionally abusive behaviors who have this diagnosis. I'm only going to cover a couple of things so that you better understand some of the characteristics or behaviors that people exemplify when they have a narcissistic personality disorder or just traits. Here are some things that you can look out for. Grandiose sense of self-importance. These people feel super important and special and more special than other people, and they can do things better than others, and they kick ass when they really don't. They live in a fantasy world that supports their delusions. They confabulate certain stories. There is a need for constant praise and admiration, a tremendous sense of entitlement. They exploit others without guilt or shame. They frequently demean and they intimidate and they bully and belittle others. It's important to note that some people have traits and behaviors that do not meet full diagnostic criteria, but that doesn't mean that these people aren't dangerous, because they are. So, what does withholding love look like? It looks like ignoring you. Remember our definition earlier that touched upon presence? By ignoring you, they are withholding affection and presence. It looks like refusing to engage in conversation after an argument that has not gone their way. It is the person knowing that you're in distress. Here it is again, withholding affection and refusing to acknowledge you, giving you the cold shoulder, using your vulnerability against you. Simply put, it's psychological abuse, it's emotional abuse. But Dr. A, some people just need to cool off. They need to cool off after an argument, after an altercation. I agree with cooling off. Cooling off is healthy. But listen, there is a difference between occasionally going silent on someone because of emotional overwhelm, or perhaps being the avoidant type, and the behavior that I'm describing. Really quickly, avoidant types or avoidant attachment, these individuals, they tend to suppress their outward displays of emotion due in large part to parents or caregivers that were emotionally unavailable. These people have an avoidant attachment style. Sometimes they'll go silent for a little bit, but the thing about it is they don't mean to be abusive. The behavior that I'm describing is. It is not normal to intentionally hurt someone. It is not normal for you to tell someone that they are hurting you and for them to continue the mistreatment. It is not normal to not receive an apology for ill caused. It is not normal. Stop lying to yourself. And if you think it's normal, then chances are you grew up with parents or caregivers that exemplified, that lived this behavior. If so, I'm sorry, it's not okay. Please look into exploring these pieces of you before it continues to get passed down on to the next generation in your family and just out in the world. Pain patterns do get passed on, and they will live until a brave soul in the family finally says, no more. You want to hear a disturbing piece of trivia? Cults use emotional withholding to control their members. Members will exclude other members, refusing to talk or interact with them. The abusers try and teach their victims a lesson. That way, the victims cave toward the needs of the cult. If it sounds crazy, it's because it is. I've come across this behavior personally, and I have to admit that I have attempted to work with it. Why? Stupidity. No, I'm kidding. I've put up with this behavior in the past in the name of love, because I'm an empath, because I give people many chances, and because I believe that people can change. Oh, that last part. These types, they don't truly change. If they do, it's difficult for them to sustain good behavior under moderate to severe stress. I'm brave enough to admit that putting up with this behavior only brought me incredible sadness. I personally kept trying to find the why below the why below the why. And then I remembered the story of the frog and the scorpion. This story is not mine, by the way. There are different versions of it out there. But I wanted to share it because it may help you understand that sometimes there is no why for mistreatment. There is no great explanation. some things are just kind of a mystery. There was a scorpion, and he ran into a lake. He knew that he wouldn't be able to cross it. He spotted a small frog and asked the frog to take him across the lake. The little frog said, "If I do that, you'll surely sting me." To which the scorpion replied, "I promise, I won't. I just need to get across the lake." The little frog reluctantly obliged, and midway through their journey, the scorpion stung the little frog. In his dying breath, the frog asked, "Why would you do that?" And the scorpion replied, "Because I'm a scorpion." I've learned through life lessons, clinical practice, and the psychological literature that some people in life are just scorpions. And we must be mindful of inviting these people into our lives. And if they are already in our lives, either disconnect or keep space between you and them. So, what are the consequences of emotional withholding? What are the consequences of withholding love? Well, the immediate short term effects include confusion. Is this really happening to me? Is this emotional abuse, or nah? I don't know. Maybe, kind of. Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. The second thing we most often see, fear. Should I be afraid of what comes next? Does it get worse? Will it turn physical? And the greatest fear of all for someone who's usually absorbed this kind of behavior because of their own things that they need to work through, the wait, will they leave me? I'm not ready for that. Next thing, hopelessness or overcompensating for the other party. The whole, is this ever going to get better? I don't think so. No, it'll never get better, but you know what? That's okay because I can do more. I can be even nicer. I can cater to this person more. The next thing, shame. How could I let this happen to me? I'm smart. Wait, I can't tell anyone. No one is going to believe me, or just no, everything's fine, everything's perfect. It's okay. The going silent and not speaking to me for a week is totally fine. He'll talk to me or she'll talk to me next Monday. Let's talk about some of the physical side effects that come with emotional withholding, withholding love, or just emotional abuse in general. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing, perseverating on what is happening. Moodiness. How could you not have low mood and sadness? How could you not be walking around in a cloud and lacking clarity when you're clearly being mistreated? Muscle tension, bone pain, what we call in the therapeutic world somatic symptoms in the clinical world. Nightmares. Am I sleeping next to a monster? Dreaming about the events or the emotional, psychological abuse that's happening to you over and over again. Racing heartbeat, the development of anxiety, and just aches and pains in the body because your body doesn't forget what's been done to it. Bodies absorb stress from emotional abuse. What are some of the long-term effects of withholding love, or the consequences, I should say? Depression, that's pretty obvious. Anxiety, PTSD. Yeah, no, I'm serious. People that have long histories of emotional abuse often develop PTSD-like symptoms because of everything that they've been through and what they've had to endure. And then they may move on to a different relationship or friendship or business partnership, but it doesn't matter. The emotional abuse was just so profound that they carry it with them, both physically and mentally. Other long-term effects, chronic health conditions, and then, of course, if the emotional abuse has led to physical abuse, death. If you find yourself in this situation, if you find yourself listening to this podcast and you think, maybe, just maybe, I should start contemplating abuse recovery. I want you to start thinking about, learning about, educating yourself about what a healthy relationship looks like. Look it up, talk to a friend, read some books. The information is out there. The next thing that I'd like you to do is spend some time with people who are able to reflect back to you who you truly are. These are people that will validate that you're not crazy, that the emotional abuse that is or has taken place was wrong, and that you didn't deserve that, ever. Other things when you're thinking about abuse recovery and you're building yourself up, make new friends, engage in activities that are outside of this abusive person's orbit. So, if the emotional abuse is happening at work, you might want to be a little more mindful of who you sit with at lunch. If this emotional abuse is happening between a friend, get yourself a new friend or create space between you and that friend, a lot of space. If this emotional abuse is happening to you and you are in a romantic relationship, it's time for you to take a look at whether or not this relationship is something truly healthy. Doesn't sound like it. If the person is willing to get some help, and how much more you're willing to endure. Is it even safe for you to endure these things? I also want you to start looking for meaning and for purpose in the things that you do in work, in volunteer, and in hobbies. Start taking your power back when it's been taken away from you, and that is what happens when you are emotionally abused. Finally, when you get to that point where you know with certainty that you're going to move on from someone that's caused you this kind of pain, educate yourself. Why do you continue to attract these kind of people? Why do you want to move on? Be specific. Seek support, friends, family, therapy, and if need be, an alternative place to live. A big one here. Don't ever threaten to leave the other party if you're not truly going to do it. They just use that as leverage. When you've made the decision to leave an unhealthy space, you leave and understand that it's forever. If for your own safety you have to have an exit plan, make sure that it's well thought out. Here's the thing, once you're gone, all contact with this toxic person needs to cease. No emails, no texts, no social media, no trolling their social media. It will only hurt you. Bottom line, cut off all access to you. Know that you're going to go through a grieving period. No matter how bad the abuse is, this is still a loss. And the other thing is, don't expect these people to feel bad for what they did, because they don't. They're the monsters of this earth. These last 2 episodes have been heavier, and guess what? I see you. I know that something I said today has rattled you enough to make you think. Good, because we are going to choose light where there was once darkness. We are going to choose to step into the sun versus live in those shadows. And you know what else? We're going after skeletons. Yeah, I use the skeletons in the closet analogy with my clients, but in the soul gym, meaning my office, really it's your office, we take those skeletons out and we stare them down. And then I ask my clients, what you want to take out first? A leg, a digit, a finger, or just go for the head? This, of course, is symbolic and based on a client's readiness and how deep a client wants to go with regard to their emotional trauma. I'm proud to report that our closets, they look cleaner, and remnants left behind have been rendered useless against us now. Useless because recovery is in progress, and restoration has begun. I always leave you with an ask. I am going to ask you to take inventory of your life. When and where have you allowed emotional abuse? Maybe it wasn't as bad as emotional withholding love. Maybe it's another type of emotional abuse, gaslighting, stonewalling. Stonewalling is very similar in that it's your attempt to talk to a person that you care about or a relationship that matters and they don't bother responding. And gaslighting is simply the twisting of information where you, as an example, say to the person, what happened here? Why did we get into this argument? What's going on? And they'll tell you you're full of shit. That's not the way that things happened. But I want you to take inventory. When and where did you allow this to happen? Who was the offender? Why did you allow it? Have you continued to do so? And if so, why? Are you ready to stop the abuse? What kinds of support do you need to be able to do this? Set a timeline, gather your supports, and make the move to get out of that space as immediately as possible. If you're thinking, I can't, you can. It's just not going to be easy. And there are lots of examples of I can all around you if you just look hard enough. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I know today was a little different than some of the uplifting content that I usually put out there, but this episode was very much requested. You request, I listen. I appreciate you so much, and please continue to connect with me by going to themisfittherapist.com and on Facebook and Instagram. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to the Misfit Therapist podcast. Show some love by sharing this message and simply by living each day like a badass.